Hey again, everybody. Now that we've moved out of the scientific revolution, we're gonna move on to look at the Enlightenment today. And the question is, what is the Enlightenment? Last time we talked about being enlightened, it was during the time of the Buddha and Buddhism, that kind of idea. Very different Enlightenment in terms of what we're talking about now. The Enlightenment was actually a philosophical movement, basically an idea, a period of thinking in intellectuals. This happened in the 1700s, late 16, early 1700s, all the way up to the very start of the 1800s, and really is inspired by a scientific revolution, especially Isaac Newton. Essentially, a bunch of really smart thinking kind of guys got together and said, these scientists, this guy Newton, they have a lot of really great ideas. I wonder if we can take their idea of the scientific method, and can we apply it to everything else? And basically, how can we make life better by trying to figure out things by using a scientific method? And that's kind of what they were trying to do is make progress, improve life, improve society, and really focused on four big ideas here. The first one down here is the idea of reason. Reason is like logic. So the question is, what is the logical or reasonable thing a person would do? And can a person using their own thoughts, their own mind, figure out what things they're actually talking about? Next thing is natural law. So it's kind of basically the natural law and natural rights that govern everybody is what we're talking about here. And so basically everybody having the same laws, everybody having the same rights they have to follow, and that's a big part of it. The idea here is hope. We've kind of seen that people weren't really too keen or too optimistic about people. And this idea of hope is a little different here, that people have more hope for the future of humanity, that they think humanity can get better and make progress and improve in certain ways, whether it be religious tolerance, whether it be education, literature, whatever, we're going to improve in some way, shape, or form. And so the guy in charge of this is called the philosophe. And philosophe is just a French word for philosopher. Now don't think philosopher like Aristotle, Socrates, those kind of guys. These guys weren't just thinkers, they were writers, they were journalists writing newspapers and magazines, they were college professors, economists. They had a lot of different jobs. But their number one goal is the idea of social reform. Basically trying to reform things for everybody and make the world a better place. What they wanted to do. Try to show their way to improve what's going on in the world. A lot of these guys were French, okay? A lot of them were French in terms of where they're from. That's where a lot of the problems were happening in this time in Europe. They're trying to reform. But there's some English, a couple of German guys as well that were considered philosophes. But their main goal here is a social reform. Here's a little quote I want to hit you guys with. It's a philosopher applies himself to the study of society with the purpose of making his kind better. And that's kind of the big idea we have here for this part. We kind of did that first part of the quote there, the second part got cut off. But essentially you're trying to apply yourself to make society a better place. So let's start with our people here, okay? First I want to look at is John Locke. In your note sheet, I asked you guys to kind of give me the highlights of kind of summarize what impact they make. John Locke was an English philosopher in the late 1600s, and he had called big ideas. His first one was called tabula rasa. He writes that every single person started as a blank slate right here, and when you're born, you're blank. There's nothing there, but your ideals, your morals and stuff, you're just really blank. And that people are molded by their experience. So the more you experience, the more you things do, that develops the person you are. This went against some of the earlier writings that said that all people are inherently bad. In a sense, Locke says that all people are good and that they have the ability to rule themselves and make their own decisions. And he was very big into the idea of natural rights. These are basically rights that nature gives every single person. He broke those rights down to three things. He says life, liberty, and property. I'm going to get more in depth in this in class, but basically says every single person has the right to live the life they want to live. Every person has a right to freedom to kind of do what they want to do, which will affect. And lastly, every single person has a right to property. You have a right to own your own stuff. People can't take it away from you. We see these later on in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. He also made some rules in his second treatise or second essay on government that the people, who should be inherently good, should be able to rule themselves, can actually kick out rulers who are being unfair. He kind of said that people, if rulers are taking away these natural rights, it's the people's right then to kick them out of office. So, kind of very interesting ideas we kind of look at here. Another guy is a guy named Montesquieu. He's a baron. He's a French noble, actually. He's known as Baron Montesquieu. Who wrote a book called The Spirit of Laws. And basically, he took that scientific method and applied it to how relationships work in both a social and a government setting. In the end, Montesquieu said there should only be three kinds of governments. It depends on how big your country is. He said republics are good for small countries because there's elected people, small group of people. You can pick representatives for them. He said despots, like an emperor, is good for a medium-sized country, kind of one person in charge, but they should be a good despot. And a monarchy is good for a large country. You got to pick anybody. In the end, he said though, you have to make sure you have a way to check everybody, and then you have to have basically have separation of powers, which is what we see here in this picture of the U.S. government. And Montesquieu really inspires the idea of having three branches of government: a legislative branch, a judicial branch, and executive branch. Montesquieu looked at the English government this time, where you had a legislative branch called Parliament, you had an executive branch, essentially the king or queen, you had a judicial branch of the courts. Basically, that it's a government's job to check itself. That you should be able to have a government check itself, have different branches, make sure no one branch gets too powerful. We see this here in the United States today in terms of our checks and balances, which hopefully you guys know a little bit about. If not, we'll get more into it in class and next year in American government. Another guy here is a guy by the name of Voltaire. Now, Voltaire is not this guy's true name. Voltaire is a pen name. Much like earlier writers, the church and the government didn't really like these guys. And so Voltaire, among others, had to write under false names. In fact, Montesquieu wrote a book under a false name. And that was a false name, but actually kind of wrote a satire book, kind of like a joke book, about being a Persian, a guy from the Middle East, immigrant into France. Voltaire does the same kind of thing, but he writes with a pen name. Originally, he was from a very wealthy family, middle class group, but he had one big thing he really preached. That was a lot about religious toleration. He said basically you should not be picked on because you are a certain religion. His big quote in his book is that we are all brothers under one God. So if you're a Jew, Christian, Protestant, Catholic, whatever, it should make a bit of difference. And also in this time was the idea of deism. Deism was kind of a development by different authors, different writers, including guys like Thomas Paine, Newton, so on and so forth, who basically had an idea that said, hey, God created the universe and he let it run. It's almost kind of like Newton's big clock thing. That hey, if we believe in God, we believe in religion, a universe got created, but now it's being run by reason and natural law, being run by us being logical and us kind of thinking through things and doing things logically. Another guy was the name of Denis Diderot. I would say Diderot, but it's Diderot. And Denis Diderot was the first guy to write the encyclopedia. If we think encyclopedia, you think those big, huge, giant books like that. But the encyclopedia started in France in the 1700s. And Diderot was the first writer and editor creator of the encyclopedia. Basically, the encyclopedia looked like this down here. It was full of different articles about just about everything, from woodworking and wig making to politics, religion, whatever. It was full of different ways to try and challenge the way of current thinking. All kinds of knowledge is out there. I got a chance this summer to read an original Diderot encyclopedia from the 1700s. This book was priceless, and I had to thumb through and look at it. There was stuff in it about wig making, about shipbuilding, about raising cattle. Basically, any article you want, any kind of topic was in there. But a lot of the articles that were in there supported a lot of things like toleration. They called for reforms like more education. They called for reforms like equal rights. They called for reforms like trying to fix problems that were happening in the countries. And it really helped to spread the Enlightenment ideas of like guys like John Locke and guys like Voltaire and toleration, and guys like Montesquieu and Rousseau, who we'll talk about next. Here's Adam Smith. A little bit, I should say. Here's Adam Smith as well. He was a Scottish economist and minister as well. His ideas were all about the economy and basically why do people make the decisions they make. And his big change was that is that economic self-interest is that society is going to benefit if we do what interests us the best or is best for us the best. He essentially said there was this big invisible hand, like this hand right here, that is magically pushing us in the right direction. So if you're out looking to buy something, you may say, well, should I buy it or not? Ask somebody. He basically kind of said, this invisible hand, your self-interest is going to do the best in the end. And if everybody is working for their best self-interest, then society is going to benefit in the end. If everybody's working the best they can, the job they love, then society is going to benefit in the end. You're kind of being pushed that way. He also said government needs to stay out of the economy. This is the age of mercantilism, when governments were ruining the economies, they're ruining colonies, all those kind of things. And he basically said government needs to stay out of the economy. Let people trade where they want to trade with. Let people work with who they want to work with. Let that invisible hand guide you to the right spot. His book was The Wealth of Nations. And his Wealth of Nations, he basically said that government only involves itself in three things in a country. First is national defense. They got to keep an army, make sure the country stays secure. Number two is a police force. Make sure everybody's property rights, everybody's religious rights, everybody's stuff is all taken care of within the country. Last thing is public works. Make sure we have religion. Make sure we have roads, canals, railroads, those kind of things to make sure that all things are per within a country. Our last idea here is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Uh, Now he was a French guy, a little bit different. He was a little bit of a recluse, if you will. He was basically so that people are obsessed with property. All people want to do is get more and more stuff. And he says basically we become slaves to the government because we go to the government and say, "Hey, help us protect our property. We need to keep our property," and we end up giving more and more of ourselves to the government. He said, "Forget that." He said, "Okay, let's make a social contract." He said, "Let's have every single person instead of just being obsessed with property, getting more stuff for yourself. Let's all work together." And we govern by what he called the general will. Basically, in the end, we want to do what's best for everybody and what's best for me. Do what's best for the many instead of what's best for the few or the one. He basically said there's no idea of self-interest. Basically, the exact opposite of Adam Smith here. But he said we want to make sure that you all work together and achieve the best goal together. We'll look little more in detail later on, guys. Okay. Basically, he said you want to kind of work towards a bigger general goal. Last thing was education. And he said, kind of help bring out kids' natural instincts. Don't hold them back, but kind of keep away what they're really good at. Let them do their thing. Let them learn on their own a little bit. He wrote a book called Emile about education in Prussia, which was right next to France, and kind of how the education was kind of holding kids back that way. The last topic here will be on women's rights. Now, most intellectuals we talked about so far, scientists, etc., but with men. The question is, what about the women? Do they have anything involved with this too or not? Really? And they really, really did, to a certain degree. A lot of times when we're being held down by men, they're kind of told their spot was not in these realms. But there were women involved in science. There were also women involved in Enlightenment as well. And one of the main women involved in Enlightenment was this lady right here named Mary Wollstonecraft. She was an English writer, and she wrote a book called The Vindication of the Rights of Women. Basically argued that men having power over women was wrong. Kind of that line in the wedding where you say you should obey that kind of stuff, and then love, cherish, and obey. She goes, that ain't right. Um, a lot of people argue that monarchs, kings, and queens shouldn't have power over other people because there's nothing more better about them. Nothing better about them at all as a person. Which says if people are arguing that kings and queens shouldn't be ruling people, then why should men get a chance to rule over women? And she said that if the reason, the ability to think and think logically is the big part makes you a human, then women can think too. Women can think reasonably, women can use reason, and so women should have all the same rights that men do. Now, she wasn't very popular amongst men, but she's very, very popular among women. She called for a lot of things for women. Equal rights to education, first off, that women go to school, women learn how to read. Call for an economic situation. If women work, get paid the same money. Even today, yet women get paid 77 cents to a dollar, so we don't see that yet today. And also in politics, that women should have a right to rule, women should have a right to be a part of government. Now, when they talk about all these ideas, was in what's called the salon. The salon were in these fancy drawing rooms. Drawing rooms are kind of like early on dens and really rich houses, a lot of art and tables, that kind of stuff. And basically, rich people and philosophic and kind of people who were involved, middle class people got around. And they sat around and talked about these new philosophic ideas. Talked about rights and nature and reason and logic and toleration, all those kind of ideas. And they did it. They sit around, talk about these ideas, drink tea, drink coffee. In fact, I had a professor at college who said the only reason the Enlightenment ever actually happened was because of coffee. Because people sat around and drank that kind of stuff. Now, typically, the woman of the house was the host of these salons. Most famous one was a woman by the name of Madame Geoffrey. She was a wealthy merchant's wife, and she considered to have the best salons in all of France. People came all over the place to sit around together and just talk about these topics in the salons, and it became a really, really big thing in Europe in the late 1700s. Just kind of review what we talk about here, guys. Enlightenment is basically how do we make social changes, okay? Rights, those kind of things, government, religion, toleration. How do we make those changes by using scientific method and by using reason, logic? The big ideas we have here, guys, are natural rights. Those being rights given to you by nature that all people should have. The idea of toleration, the idea that we be tolerant of other people and other people's ideas. Now, people can really do great things. People can rule themselves. People are not just bad critters that need somebody to boss them around. It's really important because it leads to a lot of things. First off, it leads to revolutions. The American Revolution, French Revolution, both a big part of the Enlightenment. It leads to new ideas, new writings about how people should rule their governments. Also leads to new governments in general, like the United States and its Democratic Republic are a part of these ideas. Thanks for listening, guys. Give me a follow, give me a subscribe. We'll probably see you